The morning in Cedar Ridge always smelled like burnt coffee, dusted biscuits, and the kind of quiet that made a man believe the world still had decency left. Elijah Beckett stood outside the sheriff's station with a steaming metal cup in hand, watching the sunlight crawl lazily over the wooden rooftops as if it, too, had just rolled out of bed. The wind carried the familiar scent of pine and saddle leather, mixing into something nostalgic and earthy, something that reminded Elijah why he tolerated small towns. They were simple, predictable, untouched by the galaxy's chaos. Which was why the sky splitting open like an angry silver wound above Main Street made his coffee taste significantly worse. Elijah blinked as the swirling crack widened. He didn't panic. Panic never helped anyone, and besides, the last time an interstellar empire tried to flex above Wyoming, they'd gotten lost, demanded directions, and accidentally vaporized a feed store. This felt similar but sharper, like someone who hadn't just wandered off their star map, but arrived with a grudge. The crack shimmered, then snapped open fully, revealing an angular warship shaped like a cruel metal crescent. Its hull glowed with shifting alien glyphs. Elijah sighed into his cup. "Of all the days," he murmured. "You'd think invading species would schedule appointments." The ship descended with predatory slowness. Cedar Ridge woke up in gasps. The baker dropped a tray of bread. 2 ranchers sprinted for shelter. Sheriff Lansing burst through the station doors shouting something about insurance not covering cosmic nonsense again. Elijah simply watched, steady as a fence post, letting the moment unfurl. He'd seen dozens of ships, but this one gave off the kind of arrogance that only an empire too large to fear consequences could possess. His grandmother stepped out of the general store, with a bag of flour tucked under her arm. She squinted at the descending menace. "Elijah," she called. "If those fellas dent my roof again, you tell them I keep a shotgun for uninvited guests." He lifted his cup. "Noted. I'll pass along your hospitality." The ship's landing thrusters roared, churning dust into spirals. Doors folded outward like steel petals, revealing tall, pale blue soldiers with segmented armor that shimmered in the sun. Their elongated heads scanned the town with disdain, like explorers disappointed by primitive decor. The lead officer floated forward on a grav disc, lips curled in disgust. "Local inhabitants," he announced, voice amplified across the street. "You stand in the presence of the Calixian Empire. Remain still as we evaluate your biological worth." Elijah took a slow sip. "I really wish they'd open with a handshake instead of a threat." The officer ignored him. More soldiers fanned out, scanning buildings with humming rods. One pointed at the bakery, as though it were an archaeological tragedy. Another poked a horse, which responded by biting his glove. The alien shrieked in tones not meant for human ears. "Looks like Buck doesn't appreciate Empire etiquette," Elijah muttered. Sheriff Lansing grabbed him by the elbow. "Please tell me your people back home have some kind of plan for this." Elijah smiled softly. "We always have a plan. It's just never the one anyone expects." The officer's gaze settled on Elijah, studying him the way scientists studied suspiciously pleasant chemicals. "You appear calm for a lesser mammalian lifeform," he said. "Caffeine helps," Elijah replied. "Would you like some? It's brewed strong. Might melt your insides, but in a good way." The officer recoiled. "Your insolence is noted." Soldiers began rounding up townsfolk, herding them with buzzing prods toward the center of Main Street. Elijah watched with a tightening jaw. They weren't killing people, yet, but they were certainly enjoying the power imbalance. A child cried as an alien dragged her from her mother. An elderly man collapsed in fear. A dog barked until a soldier stunned it senseless. Elijah set his coffee cup down on a nearby crate. The gesture was small, but inside him something shifted, slow as ice cracking beneath boots. He approached the officer. "Release them," he said gently. The officer tilted its head. "You are not in a position to request anything." Elijah exhaled, long and even, the way he always did before stepping into the version of himself he preferred to hide. "Cedar Ridge is a peaceful place," he said. "These people farm, fix fences, burn their biscuits. They're no threat to you. That is precisely why they are suitable test subjects." Test subjects, Elijah repeated. He tasted the words like poison. You attacked them without provocation. Provocation, the officer echoed, amused. You misunderstand, human. Empires do not require provocation. A familiar heat crawled through Elijah's ribs. Not anger, not fear, but something colder, measured, like a switch he wished never had to exist. But Cedar Ridge wasn't just a town. It was quiet mornings and stubborn neighbors. It was the last gentle place on a planet that had weathered too many storms. And these aliens had just tried to break it. His grandmother approached a soldier, who was scanning her like a grocery item. You put that thing down or I'll crack you over the head with my purse, she snapped. The soldier attempted to restrain her. Elijah stepped forward, but 3 more aliens blocked him. The officer floated closer, eyes glowing. We will be taking several of your species with us. Your genetic diversity intrigues us. You, in particular, possess heightened neural markers. You will make an exceptional specimen. Elijah smiled in a way that made the officer's gaze flicker uncertainly. You really don't want to do that. And why is that? Because, he said, reaching into his coat pocket, I don't like being touched. He revealed a small silver keychain, a simple thing, dented from age, shaped like a tiny rocket ship. He pressed his thumb against the underside. A faint beep sounded. The aliens paused. What did you activate? The officer demanded. Nothing dangerous, Elijah said lightly. Just a reminder. The officer scoffed, but there was a tremor beneath the mockery. Soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons. Elijah didn't move. His heartbeat stayed steady. Above them, the ship's engines flared, casting jagged shadows across the street. The ramp extended further and a new squad emerged. Heavier armor, sharper weapons. They shoved the captured townsfolk inside, including Elijah's grandmother. Elijah! She shouted, struggling. Don't let these ugly cranes take me. I'm working on it, he said calmly, though every muscle in his body screamed to act. The officer raised a glowing baton. You will step aboard voluntarily, human. Resist, and we will eradicate this entire settlement. Elijah met his gaze with a polite, almost sorrowful expression. You're making a mistake. We decide what mistakes exist. Elijah nodded slowly, as if offering condolences. All right then. Take me. But release the child and the elders. The officer hesitated, but only for a heartbeat. Agreed. Your compliance benefits our efficiency. Elijah walked up the ramp without a struggle, his hands loose at his sides. Inside, the air smelled of metal and chemicals. He kept his eyes on his grandmother as she was tied to a restraint column. She mouthed something to him. Don't you dare do anything stupid. Elijah smiled back. Who, me? Never. The aliens sealed the ramp. Engines screamed. The ship rose, tilting the world beneath it. Cedar Ridge shrank in the windows. Elijah stood perfectly still until the officer approached him. Curious, it said. Your pulse remains steady. Are you not afraid? Fear is a luxury, Elijah replied. I prefer strategy. You are powerless. Temporarily, Elijah said. The officer gestured for soldiers to restrain him, but a sudden tremor shook the ship. Lights flickered. What is that? The officer barked. Elijah looked up. His voice was soft as snowfall. That's the reminder. The officer stiffened. Explain. Elijah leaned slightly toward him, lowering his voice as though sharing a secret. You're not the first empire to test humanity. But you might be the last. The floor hummed violently. Alarms blared. Outside the viewing window, streaks of blue light rippled across the horizon. Sharp, clean, deliberate. Not natural. Not random. The officer turned slowly toward the site, suddenly unsure. Elijah clasped his hands behind his back, serene as a man watching clouds drift. You just woke up a sleeping planet, he said. And trust me, Earth doesn't wake up gently. The officer opened its mouth to speak, but the ship lurched as an unseen force pulled it into the sky. Elijah smiled with polite finality. Now, he whispered, You've got our attention. Elijah Beckett had always thought hyperspace travel felt like riding inside a refrigerator during an earthquake. The Calixian vessel screamed through the corridor of warped light, engines trembling, bulkheads rattling like loose teeth. Yet he stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind his back, expression calm enough to annoy every alien within arm's reach. The soldiers guarding him kept glancing over, as if waiting for a human to break down, cry, or beg. Humans tended to disappoint their expectations. One soldier hissed something in its native clicking language. Elijah smiled. If that was an insult, points for creativity. If it wasn't, please continue. I like learning new vocabulary. The soldier stiffened, uneasy. When the ship finally tore back into real space, a swirl of luminous white towers filled the viewport. Varkon Prime, capital of the Calixian Empire. The city stretched like an impossible crown. Spires like silver fangs, floating platforms woven between them, neon glyphs shifting in crimson spirals. A star the color of molten gold rose behind the skyline, bathing the capital in eerie radiance. Elijah exhaled softly. Pretty. A little dramatic. But pretty. The officer from Cedar Ridge glided toward him on its grav disk. You will refrain from speaking unless addressed, human. Of course, Elijah said politely. Though I should warn you, I tend to talk when nervous. You are nervous? Horrified, Elijah replied cheerfully. The officer twitched. They escorted him through a docking bay, where hundreds of soldiers marched in disciplined lines. Rows of alien scientists waited with scanners, murmuring about exceptional human neural activity and rare resource potential. Elijah gave them all a pleasant nod. The more they underestimated him, the easier everything later became. He was taken through corridors carved from obsidian black stone, studded with pulsating blue veins like the planet itself was breathing. Screens flickered with propaganda, images of Empire ships conquering lesser species, crowds kneeling, territory lines expanding across star maps. The Empire's pride was visible in every step of every soldier. Pride was a funny thing. It cracked easiest. They reached the council hall, its enormous doors rising like a mountain split open. Inside, the chamber glowed with cascading lights, platforms rising in rings around a central pit of shimmering mist. Representatives from 27 species hovered or sat in thrones constructed to accommodate everything from tentacles to crystalline limbs. The Calixian High Chancellor, towering and adorned in living armor that rippled like liquid glass, leaned forward. Human, he declared, his voice vibrating through the air. You stand before the Empire Council to answer for your species' insolence. Elijah stepped into the center platform as the mist curled around his boots. Hello, he said brightly. Thank you for the warm welcome. I brought cookies. He raised a small metal tin. Soldiers immediately leveled weapons at him. Oh, relax, Elijah sighed. They're chocolate. The dangerous kind only if you're lactose intolerant. A murmur rippled across the chamber. Confusion, irritation, mild panic. Elijah loved that combination. State your identity, the Chancellor said. Elijah Beckett, Earth Defense Liaison. Good with coffee. Terrible at small talk. Excellent at cleaning up galactic messes. Your world is primitive. True, Elijah agreed. But we make great pastries. A reptilian council member snarled. We captured 14 of your kind. They will be studied. Their bodies belong to us now. Elijah's polite smile thinned by a fraction, small enough to pass unnoticed, unless one knew him. About that, he said, I'd like them back. Laughter erupted. Some cackled. Some hissed. One species rattled its crystalline wings in amusement. You are amusing, the Chancellor said. We admire your confidence. Misplaced, but admirable. It's not confidence, Elijah replied, tapping his thermos lightly against his palm. Just manners. And warnings. A Tal'Zuri elder, delicate and translucent like carved moonstone, leaned forward. Its voice trembled. There is something strange in this human's tone. Fear? The Chancellor mocked. No, the elder whispered. Calculation. Elijah gave it a gentle nod of respect. The Chancellor gestured at a transparent wall behind him. Lights flickered, revealing the abducted humans suspended in containment pods, alive, conscious, furious. Elijah saw his grandmother glaring through the barrier, muttering curses the Empire translation software thankfully could not process. "They are unharmed," the Chancellor said. "For now." Elijah clasped his hands again. "That's good. I get very irritated when people harm my family." "You are in our capital," a council member snapped. "Your threats are meaningless." "Oh, that wasn't a threat," Elijah replied. "Just a forecast." The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. "What do you know of our power?" Elijah tilted his head thoughtfully. "Enough to know you assume your empire is safe because it's large, loud, and full of shiny metal. But humanity has a saying. The bigger they are, the more complicated the cleanup." Their confusion deepened. The Chancellor leaned forward. "You dare mock us while surrounded?" "Yes," Elijah said warmly. "Surrounded is my favorite position." Several guards gripped their weapons. A booming alarm suddenly echoed through the hall. Screens flared. Signals crashed. The entire chamber vibrated with tremors so deep they seemed to pulse through bone. "What is this disturbance?" the Chancellor roared. Elijah checked his wrist device. "Oh good. Right on schedule. I was worried traffic might delay them." "Delay what?" the Chancellor demanded. The lights in the room flickered. The translucent mist at Elijah's feet briefly turned electric blue. Outside the council hall's colossal windows, the once calm skyline erupted in streaks of bright azure light. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't natural. It was dozens, no hundreds, of tiny shimmering anomalies, like pinpricks tearing open reality itself around the capital. They formed a halo above Varkon Prime, humming with growing power. The council froze. "What are those?" whispered a crystalline representative. Elijah unscrewed his thermos lid, inhaling the steam like a man appreciating good soup. "Orbital gates," he said. "Human-made. Triggered remotely. They unfold space like origami. My team's been planting them for years." A wave of horror rippled through the chamber. "You lie," a Calixian general shouted. "Wish I were," Elijah said. "I'd much rather be home with a fresh cinnamon roll." The first gate blossomed fully, a swirling ring of charged particles. Through it emerged a matte black human warship, sleek, silent, angular. Behind it, more gates stabilized. One by one, human vessels slid through like sharks entering still water. The council erupted in panic. "You dare bring a fleet to our capital?" the Chancellor rasped. "Oh, that's not the whole fleet," Elijah said innocently. "Just the polite portion." A Tal'Zuri elder rose shakily. "This human is not negotiating. He is orchestrating." Elijah's smile softened, almost sympathetic. "You attacked Cedar Ridge. My home. Worse, you interrupted my breakfast. Earth takes both very seriously." Outside, the ships began positioning themselves in a perfect ring around the capital, their hulls glowing with restrained energy. Elijah closed his thermos slowly, eyes lifting toward the drifting blue gates. "You asked why I wasn't afraid," he said, voice low but clear. "It's simple. I didn't come alone." Panic surged through the hall. And then, just before the guards reached him, the lights overhead dimmed, a single tremor rolled through the floor, and the largest gate flared open like a sun being born. Something massive waited beyond its shimmering veil. Elijah's expression lifted in calm satisfaction. "Now," he murmured, "we begin." The largest gate rippled like a sun held underwater, its light vibrating through the palace windows in shivering waves. Every alien in the council hall froze, their senses overwhelmed by a phenomenon no species had ever witnessed so close to their throne world. The Calixian Chancellor leaned forward in horror as the shimmering veil parted, revealing the Bastion-class human flagship, an angular behemoth of matte black steel that swallowed the light around it. Its hull bore a name painted in bright white strokes, USS Betty White. The aliens didn't understand the reference, but the absurdity of the name only deepened their dread. Elijah Beckett watched the ship glide into position above Varkon Prime, his expression as serene as a man contemplating weather patterns. "That one's my favorite," he said, voice mild. "Never underestimate anything named after an American grandmother." An alien general gripped the edge of the council dais. This cannot be possible. Humans do not possess gate technology of this sophistication." "Ah," Elijah replied gently. "We do when we're motivated. Turns out motivation arrives quickly when someone kidnaps our grandmas." On the other side of the hall, a crystalline Arvix delegate trembled as it activated a holographic star map. Blue dots, tiny human gate signatures, began blinking across neighboring systems. "They've ceded our territory," it whispered, shards quivering. "How long have these been here?" Elijah raised a finger thoughtfully. "About 12 years. We told everyone we were exploring. You were kind enough to give us tourist visas." The hall erupted in overlapping shouts. Some demanded explanations, others screamed orders, and a few simply stared at the growing ring of human ships forming a noose around their world. The Calixian chancellor slammed his staff against the floor, silencing the chaos with a thunderous pulse. "Human," he growled. "You will deactivate your fleet immediately." Elijah tilted his head. "You're yelling at the wrong guy. I don't command them. I just ask nicely." The chancellor sneered. "Your world will suffer for this arrogance." "You already tried making us suffer," Elijah said quietly. "That's why we're here." The doors at the far end slammed open. A Calixian fleet marshal, with armor etched in military sigils, stumbled in, chest heaving. "Chancellor, our defense grid is failing. Human ships are disabling our planetary cannons with non-lethal beams. They're melting the controls, not the structure." A ripple of confusion swept through the hall. "Why spare the weapons?" a counselor demanded. Elijah answered before the marshal could. "Because humanity isn't here to kill anyone. Not yet. We're here to make sure you understand exactly how small that choice has become." Meanwhile, high above Varkon Prime, the human fleet drifted into flawless formation. In the flagship's command deck, Admiral Reyes watched holographic indicators shift from yellow to deep ocean blue, optimal combat readiness. "They poked Earth," she said, voice calm. "They're about to learn our resting heart rate isn't the same thing as weakness." Her second-in-command nodded. "Orders." "Hold," Reyes said. "Let the diplomat finish his poetry slam." Back in the council hall, a Talzuri elder trembled as it studied Elijah's face. "His eyes," the elder whispered, "show sorrow, not hatred. That is far more dangerous." Elijah offered a gentle shrug. "We try not to hate. It's messy. Makes us sloppy. But sorrow? Sorrow is tidy. Focused. It remembers." The chancellor slammed a clawed hand onto the console. "We will never bow to humans. You insult the Empire with these theatrics." "Just demonstrations," Elijah corrected. "Non-violent, so far." "You speak as though you hold power here." "Not power," Elijah murmured. "Options." Above the planet, the human ships extended long metallic arms that locked into precise geometric alignments. The ring formation pulsed. Energy surged through the network, linking ship to ship like beads of light on an electric string. Inside a Calixian orbital tower, technicians panicked as their screens lit with unfamiliar signals. "They're forming a harmonic field." One shouted. "If it stabilizes, it could." The tower's lights went dark. Systems powered down silently. Only the reflection of human vessels remained, cold and unblinking. The chancellor's breathing grew ragged. "What is this technology?" Elijah folded his hands behind his back. "We call it a gravity anchor. It's gentle. Kind of like tucking a planet into bed. Except the blanket is made of math that your species hasn't discovered yet." Gasps echoed through the hall. And then the first shockwave hit. Not destructive, no fire, no explosions. Instead, a perfectly circular ripple expanded across the sky, visible even through the council hall windows. It washed over the city like a glassy tide, freezing every aerial vehicle, grounding every battleship, and halting every missile platform in an instant. Everything mechanical simply stopped. A Calixian general watched in horror as his command badge flickered and died. How did humans create an EMP that doesn't harm biological life? Elijah shook his head. EMP? Oh no. That's old tech. This is more like a firm reminder to behave. The Chancellor's hands trembled now. Release our systems. I will, Elijah said softly, as soon as my people are returned unharmed. The Chancellor hissed. They are invaluable specimens. Elijah took one quiet step forward. Soldiers raised weapons, but he didn't flinch. His voice dropped to a tone so soft it slid beneath the skin like a blade. They are human beings. They're from my town. They bake bread on Sundays and fix fences in the snow. They laugh loudly. They weep honestly. They are not yours. Silence swallowed the chamber. Even the mist at Elijah's feet seemed to still. On the other side of the hall, a young alien technician watched the human warships on her screen, her 4 fingers trembling. They could crush us, she whispered to her superior, without firing a shot. Elijah gave her a small, kind smile. We don't want to crush anyone. Truly. But when someone threatens what we love, we get creative. Suddenly, one of the human ships repositioned itself in a slow, deliberate arc, aligning directly over the palace. The hull split open, revealing the internal glow of a massive, spiraling device pulsing with gold and cobalt. Every alien recoiled. Elijah looked up at it in quiet appreciation. Oh good. They brought the stabilizer. Very thoughtful. The Chancellor nearly screamed. What is that? A conversation starter. The device spun faster. Space around it began to distort, the windows warping, reflections bending as reality itself flexed under the strain. A counselor whispered, This is impossible. Elijah inhaled deeply, eyes glinting with something warm and terribly resolute. You're right. It is impossible. Humans built it anyway. The stabilizer pulsed again, sending a soft quake through the hall, gentle, but unmistakably powerful. Elijah stepped back into the center of the mist, hands open, voice steady. Return my people, he said, before Earth stops asking nicely. The stabilizer flared once more, bathing the hall in blinding gold. And somewhere beneath their feet, deep in the planet's mantle, something ancient and human-made began to wake. The stabilizer's golden pulse washed through the council hall like the breath of something ancient rising from sleep. Windows curved inward, then outward, the world bending around the invisible shape of human intention. Every alien clung to railings or each other as the deep hum from beneath the planet's crust vibrated through bone and metal alike. Elijah Beckett stood at the center of the hall, hands folded lightly behind his back, as if he were merely waiting for a bus instead of orchestrating the unraveling of an empire. The Chancellor staggered toward him, armor flickering with static. What did you bury under our capital? He demanded, voice cracking. What have you done to our world? Oh, nothing extravagant, Elijah said mildly. Just a small device my team left during our tourist phase. Think of it as a precaution. Plan C. Plan A was peace, Plan B was diplomacy, and you were doing so well until you abducted everyone. You planted a weapon beneath our city. The Chancellor bellowed. Weapon is such an unfriendly word. I prefer backup plan. The stabilizer overhead brightened again, sending another tremor through the palace floor. Cracks snaked along the obsidian tiles, thin at first, then widening as the planet shifted. One by one, alien delegates dropped to their knees. Some prayed to their gods. Others whispered calculations of survival odds. A few simply stared at Elijah with hollow resignation. Across from him, the Talzuri elder raised trembling fingers. Human, this device you awakened, does it destroy worlds? Elijah's voice softened. No. Destroying planets leaves debris. And debris is messy. His eyes lifted toward the ceiling. This one cleans up after itself. Gasps rippled through the hall. The Chancellor trembled with fury. Release our systems at once. Elijah's expression did not change. Let my people go. You are in no position. A sudden roar interrupted him as the floor split down the center of the chamber. A column of pale blue light erupted upward, twisting like a pillar of controlled lightning. It reached toward the stabilizer hanging above the palace, connecting Earth's buried device with the human fleet in a chain of humming energy. On the docks outside, alien engineers screamed as their screens displayed impossible readings: mass displacement calculations, gravitational inversions, energy signatures far beyond Empire classification. One technician broke down completely. "It's not a bomb," she sobbed. "It's a relocation engine." Above Varkon Prime, human ships drifted into their final positions. A perfect ring. A perfect focus point. Admiral Reyes watched the stabilizer glow from her warship's bridge, voice steady as a surgeon. "Initiate world lift protocol. Keep it clean." "Clean," her second-in-command echoed. "Copy." Back inside the hall, Elijah addressed the Chancellor once more. "Return the Cedar Ridge captives. Now. Or your planet starts its journey without you." The Chancellor's claws twitched. "We will not submit to a primitive, chaotic species built on accident and stubbornness." "Fair enough," Elijah said. "Then you'll submit to physics." His wrist device chimed, and the crust of Varkon Prime began to rise. Not violently. Not explosively. Gracefully, like a world being peeled from its orbit with the careful hands of a higher power. Through the palace windows, alien cities lifted in shimmering layers as gravity loosened its grip. Towers arched. Markets floated. Oceans bulged as though the moon had swallowed a star. Delegates screamed. Soldiers dropped their weapons. Even the guards restraining Elijah stumbled back as the planet itself betrayed them. Elijah simply watched. "You see," he said gently, "humans don't seek domination. We seek balance. Respect. The simple courtesy of being left alone." He stepped closer to the Chancellor, his voice lowering to something intimate and painfully calm. "But you took farmers. Children. You took my grandmother. And you did it thinking Earth was small." "We thought you weak," the Chancellor whispered. "That was your first mistake." Elijah smiled faintly. "Your second was thinking you could fix the first." A guard shouted from the corner of the hall, pointing frantically toward the containment pods. "The human captives, they're gone. Their signatures disappeared." Elijah nodded. "Teleported safely to our fleet. Good timing." The Chancellor stared at him in disbelief. "You planned every step of this." "Elaborate planning is a human hobby," Elijah replied. "We solve puzzles for fun. And your empire, my friend, was a puzzle with very sharp corners." The floor shuddered violently as the entire palace rose a full meter in the air. Alien delegates clung to their stations, weeping in terror. The Talzuri elder collapsed, whispering, "He smiles while ending a world." "Ending?" Elijah repeated softly. "No. I said it cleans up. Watch." The stabilizer spun faster. The blue column brightened, sharpening into a perfectly cylindrical beam. Everything inside the beam began to dissolve, cleanly, silently, into motes of golden light. The palace's far wall vanished in a swirl of photons. The valley beneath the capital dissolved next, then the outer districts of the city. Not destroyed. Not broken. Simply transported. The Chancellor pressed himself back against the dais, panic replacing pride. "Where are you sending us?" Elijah exhaled slowly. "To a star," he said. "A distant one. Very hot. Very hungry." Cries erupted across the hall. "Not you personally," he added. "Just the planet." You would erase an entire world?" Elijah's eyes darkened. Not with cruelty, but with memory, grief, and a quiet, calculated resolve. "You erased a town," he said. "Cedar Ridge existed peacefully for 200 years. You burned it in a morning because you believed no one would answer." The Chancellor's voice broke. "Please, stop it." "Then say it," Elijah said. "Surrender. Release your claim over every human you've ever taken. Renounce your empire's right to test, abduct, or touch our species again. The Chancellor fell to his knees. We surrender, he rasped. We yield the Empire. Release us. Elijah pressed a finger to his wrist device. The beam halted instantly, freezing the golden dissolution midair. Half the capital hovered in suspended particles, shimmering like a half-finished constellation. Outside, the human fleet dimmed its weapons. Engines powered down. The stabilizer slowed. Elijah approached the trembling Chancellor and offered him a small nod. Good. You chose wisely. The Chancellor swallowed. You will spare our world? Elijah considered, gaze lingering on the fractured skyline. Parts of it, he said. Enough to rebuild. Why? The Chancellor whispered. Elijah turned toward the window, where Varkon Prime glowed like a wounded jewel. Because Cedar Ridge will rebuild too. And if we erase you completely, we become what you feared. The stabilizer hummed a softer note. Golden particles drifted downward like harmless snow. But then Elijah's wrist device chimed again, lower, deeper, colder. He glanced at the alert. Something else beneath the planet was waking. His expression tightened, not with anger, but with dread. Oh no, he murmured. That wasn't us. The floor lurched violently. The Chancellor's eyes widened. What, he whispered, did you do? Elijah stared at the rising tremor, heart slowing in a way only true danger could command. We didn't do this, he said. And that, he breathed, is the problem.